All right, everyone, we're doing Zechariah 10 today. Good morning. Let's get into it. All right, restoration for Judah and Israel. Ask for rain from the Lord in the season of the spring rain. We're almost there ourselves. From the Lord, who makes the storm clouds, and he will give them showers of rain to every one the vegetation in the field. For the household gods utter nonsense, and the diviners see lies. They tell false dreams, and they give empty consolation. I don't like to throw things out of context and everything, because the whole point of this Zechariah is we've been really looking at context. But there's been I keep seeing this the false prophets and the diviners, and the big prophetic word movement today is just. Everyone said Trump was going to be elected, and they not that you could say you think he's going to be elected, but if you say that God told you in a vision that Trump will be elected, you're a false prophet. Don't blame it on the lack of holy people in the country. We know we have problems. Okay, it's all this kind of reminds me of Daniel. Right after he gives his vision to Nebuchadnezzar, and he tells Nebuchadnezzar all these things about God, and then he brings the seasons. Just in the beginning of this starts out, the Lord brings the storm clouds and showers of rain. You could see the storm clouds as trials or curses, or we could see them as blessing. We need the rain for growth. We need these trials for growth. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be trying to fix our government, but Daniel, right after that, he was elected to the court of the king, right? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or if you want to say their Hebrew names, whatever, they were all elected officials. Did they just fail, or did they blame the people? They weren't holy enough, and that's why, because right in chapter 3, we see this golden statue set up, from Nebuchadnezzar. Obviously, I just told you that God is real, and he interpreted your vision about a statue. Now you're building a golden statue, and they couldn't talk Nebuchadnezzar out of this. They couldn't politic their way through it. Does that mean that the people in Babylon were living right? And you're no, they're all sinful people. There's only people in exile there. Yeah. Is this our country? Are we in exile? There were people there, and it would have been, pretty early there. But there was probably people that, especially in the Northern Kingdom, that had been living in scattered amongst Babylon and Persia for years. That was around 700. 720 Syrian captivity. Syria got wiped out, so the Northern Kingdom was scattered, and we see prophetic visions of them being scattered. Even the end of this chapter talks about the people being scattered, and God is doing that because he's scattering the seed of the Torah and truth and the message of his word, and you're to be a light and a message among the nations. That doesn't mean that this is your nation. It doesn't mean that you should be, what is the word? Can't think of it. I was called recently. New term I'm not familiar with. I'm just a fatalist. Yes, I'm a fatalist. I'm a fatalist because I believe in the word of Scripture that we'll be returned to the land. And I need to trust in God, and that I know bad things are going to happen, and I just need to strengthen my resolve and continue through and keep working on myself and working where I'm able to. That makes me a fatalist. Okay, sure. Whatever. Let's keep reading. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted for lack of a shepherd. And who should be our shepherd? Jesus and his word. My anger is hot against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders. For the Lord of hosts cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic steed in battle. From him shall come the cornerstone, and from him the tent peg. So we've had these references already. Earlier in the book of Zechariah, the cornerstone in context, being Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest. I'm thinking of false prophets. It's things didn't turn out well for Zechariah, if we're to believe what the New Testament says, that he was slain on the temple grounds, essentially, by the altar. It doesn't mean that, you kind of think, well, wasn't this whole book about the temple and getting Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple? Yeah, but they might have had an altar already, and he might have come in there like, we're meant to rebuild the temple, and he gives them like all these like prophetic word and all these visions, and I'm sure they were like, you're crazy. And you could even say today, like, well, the final redemption that you promised us hasn't happened, Zechariah, so you're a false prophet. The same thing they say about Jesus. He never offered the final redemption, so he can't be the true Messiah. So one way to recognize a prophet is they don't speak kind of highly of Israel. They don't speak highly of the Jewish people. And I was recently told that Josephus was a traitor to the Jewish people. Why? Because he said mean things to them, around 70 AD, and that's because they were being Zionistic. There's nothing wrong about wanting to return to Israel, but when you are, just read the account. People need to read the account. Go read Wars of the Jews, and Josephus fulfills the same role that every prophet up to that point has done. I'm not saying he's a prophet, but he did prophesy, right? Vespasian, he said, with Vespasian capturing him, he's like, you'll become emperor. And he's like, well, I'll keep you around, see if that happens. Lo and behold, it did. He went along with Titus, Vespasian's son, to Jerusalem, and he spoke out against the people, saying, you're being foolish. If you really want to preserve the temple and the city, just surrender. But no, they warred amongst themselves. They were not loving to their neighbor. They were slaughtering each other inside the walls. There was different factions, all warring and fighting against each other. Sounds like today, right? The Jewish people are split, and there's a lot. You can't just. Sometimes it sounds like I'm speaking against Jewish people. I've been called an anti-Semite this week too. Not all Jews are Jews, right? Not all Israel is Israel. And it's very true, and there's no historical fact that after the Bar Kokhba rebellion that the Jews changed their strategy. This kind of revolting and rebelling, being stubborn. Well, they're still stubborn, but they just tried to infiltrate government everywhere they went, and they were blessed because God continues to bless them. It's not that their bloodline, it's that they keep his word. That's the blessing. Sorry, there's nothing special about having Jewish blood. Like, ooh, you have mystical, God-blessed blood. Abraham's seed is those who keep a relationship with Yahweh. So if you don't have a relationship with Yahweh, then you're not Jewish, you're not Israel, or I kind of lump everyone together. But there's reasons they got kicked out of all these countries. Think about the Spanish Inquisition, the Bolshevik Revolution. They're getting run out of Russia. They're driven into Germany. Bad stuff happened there. They suffered. It wasn't a lack of faith or that people didn't stand up and protect the Jew. A lot of this stuff just came to a boiling point because they don't merge well, and they have this Zionistic attitude, and not saying that they brought all this on themselves. It's just, you can look at history from many different viewpoints. You can look at scripture from many different viewpoints, and it's good to just take in a larger context, especially when we've been fed a narrative. You've been fed a narrative your whole life. Like, it's even in, like, Auschwitz is even in Marvel movies now. It's like a plot point, and it's like, well, not now. It's been ever since I was a kid. Those movies are pretty old now. But World War II movies, just grew up watching them. Schindler's List. Same thing with slavery. Slavery is just this talking point. It's like, well, what people group haven't been a slave at some point? It's bad things have happened. And we're always like pointing fingers, and we're using these events out of context to prove some sort of narrative and push something. And it's all just manipulation. It's just manipulation. That's what it is. And you got to look past that. And one way to do that is just know your history. And I've been striving to do that myself. But apparently I don't know any history. I'm just an anti-Semite who needs to read some Jewish literature. My anger is hot against the shepherds. I'm reading verse 3. I will punish the leaders, for the Lord of hosts cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic steed in battle. From him shall come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, and from him every ruler, all of them together. They shall be like mighty men in battle, trampling the foe in the mud of the streets. They shall fight because the Lord is with them, and they shall put to shame the riders on horses. I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph. I will bring them back, because I have compassion on them, and they shall be as though I have not rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. This is the final redemption, right? It's going to bring back the two sticks, northern kingdom, southern kingdom, unite them. Has that happened yet? We could say maybe in the Hasmonean dynasty. We didn't see much of a return as partial fulfillment. Then Ephraim shall become like a mighty warrior, and their heart shall be glad as with wine. Their children shall see it and be glad. Their hearts shall rejoice in the Lord. I will whistle for them and gather them in, for I have redeemed them, and they shall be as many as they were before. Though I scatter them among the nations, yet in far countries they shall remember me, and with their children they shall live and return. I will bring them home from the land of Egypt, gather them from Assyria. So Egypt, idiom for the world. Assyria is always kind of like this Babylon idea, this kingdom of the north, right? That we've kind of seen repeated. And if you look at like the land, it was Assyria, and before that, the Hittites and all this kingdom, and then even going back to Nimrod, it's kind of like they've all controlled this Fertile Crescent area, and then it's just kind of changes hands. The leader has been changing, and we kind of have like this question: well, is it a leader or is it a country? Especially those people start reading Daniel and getting into Revelation, who was and is and will be. This is a system or this is a person. Those are all interesting topics that I find, because a lot of people, and if you've read my novel, I lean toward it being a person, right? An actual person in time that fits all these descriptions well, and that has been a kind of a king throughout time. We'll leave that to your own mystery. And I will bring them to the land of Gilead and to Lebanon till there is no room for them. He shall pass through the sea of troubles and strike down the waves of the sea, and all the depths of the Nile shall be dried up. The pride of Assyria shall be laid low. It kind of says that if people don't come and celebrate Sukkot, which was a big part of that was waving the what is it? Waving your, I can't remember, no, it's not an ephod, but your four species, egrog or whatever it is. It's praying to the Lord for a good harvest next year. It's thanking the Lord for everything He's done, and then praying for rain. And it says that there will be no rain for the nations, and be no rain for Egypt if they don't come up and celebrate Sukkot at the New Jerusalem. And Sukkot is a great image. It's the Feast of Feasts for a lot of reasons. It's because it's about a harvest. You have the fall harvest, and thinking about the future harvest, but also the eighth day, which is the final millennium, which is the never-ending Sabbath. Right? Essentially, you could say the final millennium is the millennial reign, and then that's when the earth is healed and renewed, and we dwell on earth forever. And that's when all nations either accept Yahweh or are destroyed. It's as simple as that. The pride of Assyria shall be laid low. And the northern kingdom, not of Israel, but the northern nations, the final battle, we see them either north of Israel, setting up for that battle of Armageddon. And the scepter of Egypt shall depart, and I will make them strong in the Lord, and they shall walk in His name, declares the Lord. Let's see if we got any good notes on this. They're always good. I won't read all of them, but got a few. There's just a few, so we'll read them all. Ask rain from the Lord. In the ancient world, national gods were not always the ones considered directly responsible for fertility, rather a variety of cosmic deities or city patrons were seen as having that jurisdiction. During the monarchy period, the people need to be reminded that it was not Baal who gave them rain, but Yahweh, their national god. Zechariah includes both the warrior aspects of the storm god with the fertility aspects indicated here. So it's always like God like showing up the other gods, just like he did in Egypt. There's a point to make against these other gods. Which is why I think these other gods were actual other gods, because like why would he try to show them up if they were just like, it's like God trying to say he's bigger than, the Captain Crunch or Tony the Tiger, somebody doesn't exist. Teraphim. The teraphim referred to just a few other times in Scripture, household gods. See the article on the household gods. I think I've read that before. Though this context is not entirely clear, it is very common for kings to refer to themselves as shepherd. And so the prophet may be alluding to the idea that there is no king to lead this group of people. Zerubbabel is a governor, but he's just a figurehead of the king at the time, which is Darius, right? We're still in the 4th year of Darius. So 70 years are just about up, right? I was just thinking about because my pastor's now going through Daniel, so I'm a little scared, a little excited. I think Daniel is what I'm going to dive into anyways. I'm kind of being forced to at this point since he's going through it, so I'm like, I might as well. I'm going to have to read it anyways. But what was I going to say? Losing my mind. Oh, well, Belshazzar, the last king, if I'm saying the name right, of Babylon. It was actually only around 50 years, if you're taking it from the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. So he was thinking 70 years was up, and that's why he was using the temple ornaments and goblets and all that and bowls. Because he's like mocking. He's like, look, the temple hasn't been taken. But he had captured like Jehoiakim, whatever it was, the king or figurehead over Israel, who had rebelled almost 20 years earlier. And so that 70 years was pretty much up at that point. But Cyrus conquered, and there's kind of like this Jewish history of Belshazzar fighting against Cyrus in this previous battle, and he puts Jews on the front line, and Cyrus gets routed and beaten, with the Medes and all that, and then he's just overconfident at that point. Well, God let you win because he was protecting the Jews, probably, and then you went and mocked him, so he just let Cyrus pretty much walk in, and Cyrus allowed people to come back to the land. It brings us to where we are today. So Daniel's an interesting book that'll set up a lot of that history for us. It's also in Jewish history that Daniel lived to be killed by Haman, so that would make him around 150 years, 160 years old. Stranger things have happened in the Bible. I kind of mentioned that to my pastor. He's like, well, that's not true. Jesus was born of a virgin and was resurrected and all these other crazy things in the Bible, but no, Daniel can't live to be 150. Of course not. That defies all logic. Cornerstone. See the note on Isaiah 28:16, tent peg. Though these notes aren't very great, right? It's like, thanks. Though foundation figurine pegs are known from earlier periods, their use is not attested in any context close to the time of Zechariah. The term here is consistently used for the pegs used to drive ropes into the ground that held up tents. Thus, they secure the stability of the tent, just as a cornerstone secures the stability of a building. For metaphoric usage associated with leadership, see. And I like the idea of the tent peg because, kind of like the whole cosmological, Hebraic worldview is pretty much like a big tent, right? The world is, it's even described as just this big old tent covering the land, and his footstool is Jerusalem. So it's like we need to secure this foundation for him. If we want to have God's presence among us, we need this foundation, and we were never able to do that. No king was ever good enough. Not even David, not Solomon. They all missed the mark because the king was always supposed to be Yahweh, right? He was always supposed to be the king. He only gave us a king because we begged him, right? Which kind of shows you that if you ask God for something fervently, he might give it to you. Doesn't mean it's good for you. So pray in his will, right? I've learned that. Pray in his will. Don't, because he might give you what you want as a lesson. Riders on horses. One of the major innovations of the Persian Empire introduced into warfare was the employment of cavalry units that could swiftly outmaneuver foot soldiers. The pride of Assyria, the scepter of Egypt. Even though the community is under the central control of a single empire, the major reference points of coercive power remained Assyria, which had both destroyed the northern kingdom and taken away thousands, and Egypt, which had received exiles from Jerusalem when it fell to the Babylonians. We talked a little bit about this with Gedaliah. Another good point for our present political time. In the prophet's report, Assyria and Egypt will no longer be able to prevent the return of the exiles. All right, let's look at the household gods. All right, it's not too long. Images that represented deceased ancestors in order to venerate them. There are a variety of opinions about the teraphim, and there probably were various practices with regard to whether these ancestors were worshipped or considered to even have a quasi-divine status. Minimally, ancestor images provided a focus for rites related to the care of the dead, and also were at times used in divination. In some of the archives from the mid-2nd millennium BC, legal documents allowed us to see how the family gods figured in the inheritance. At Nuzi, several texts indicate that the principal heir received the family gods. Remember, Rachel stole Laban's idols, or the family gods. In text from Imar, one document suggests that the household gods were not to be given to a man outside the family. In Genesis 31, Rachel would have no right to this portion of the inheritance, nor would Jacob. Laban is logically distressed over this breach of inheritance practices, as well as concerned that the care of the ancestor would be jeopardized by the loss of the images. We can therefore conclude that Rachel's interest in the teraphim has more to do with family and inheritance than with the issue of worshiping other gods. The spirits of the ancestors were not substitute deities. Kind of all reminds me of like Mulan, with all like the family gods, like ancestors and statues and that. It's kind of weird. Though some uses of them were certainly prescribed in an ideal Yahwehism, as it eventually took shape. When women married, it was customary for them to transfer their loyalty to the gods of their husband, rather than exercise any individual freedom to choose their own god. Wives were automatically, by marriage, bound to the god of the husband. In most cases, because of endogamy, the god of her fathers would be the same god as her husband, because people in the same geographic location, especially people in the same clan, tend to worship the same deities. So, there you go. All right, I gotta go to work. Hope that was not too ranty. All right, have a great day, everyone. How do I turn this off? Open recorder.